My wife said she was fighting for justice, but justice doesn't destroy families. Pride does. One photo, one message, and suddenly my mother was crying. My stepfather was humiliated, and I was married to a woman who thought chaos was virtue. She called it truth. I called it insanity. I never imagined that my life would collapse so quietly. Not with a fight, not with betrayal, just the slow erosion of everything that once felt safe. When my wife and I moved into my mum's house, it wasn't supposed to be permanent. It was survival. We told ourselves it would only be a few months, just until I got back on my feet. I'd lost a contract job after a round of budget cuts. Rent had doubled in less than a year, and the savings we'd scraped together from 2 jobs vanished faster than we expected. The one who offered help wasn't my mum. It was Greg, my stepfather. Greg's not the kind of man who says much. He's from that old American generation that works with its hands, trusts no one easily, and believes silence is a kind of strength. The kind who sharpens a knife without saying a word, fixes what's broken, and doesn't talk about feelings because feelings to him are distractions. But he's never been cruel. He believes in loyalty, order, and hard work, values that sound simple until life tests them. I respected him. Even when I didn't always understand him, there was always some quiet tension in the house, not between him and my mum, but between Greg and his daughter, Melissa. She hadn't spoken to him in years. From what I'd heard, it wasn't one big argument, more like 1,000 small cuts that bled over time. Pride, misunderstanding, resentment, family stuff, the kind that never really heals. Then came Melissa's wedding. Everyone got an invitation, except my mom. Greg took it personally, and who wouldn't? But instead of confronting his daughter, he just said quietly, "If my wife isn't welcome, then neither am I." He never mentioned it again. Didn't vent, didn't blame. Just carried the weight in silence. That's Greg, a man who bleeds privately. He's from a world where dignity means swallowing pain until it disappears, or at least looks like it has. I didn't agree with his choice, but I respected it. Sometimes family loyalty doesn't make sense. It just is, but my wife, she couldn't let it go. She has this unshakable need to be morally right. In her head, there's no gray, only good or evil, right or wrong, and if you stay neutral, you're automatically on the wrong side. She said, he abandoned his daughter. That's disgusting. I told her, it's not our place to fix that. She looked at me like I'd confessed to a crime. To her, silence equals guilt. Empathy isn't her strength. Judgment is. I should have seen it then. How dangerous moral certainty can be when it's driven by ego instead of compassion. The day of the wedding came and went. Greg stayed home, pretending to watch a fishing show. My mom hummed in the kitchen. The whole house felt heavy, the kind of quiet that clings to walls. I thought we'd get through it without drama. But my wife can't survive without chaos. She needs it like oxygen. She kept pacing the hallway, muttering about hypocrisy and fake loyalty. Then she said it, almost to herself. Melissa should see this. She should know what her father's doing while she walks down the aisle. I didn't even understand what she meant until I heard the click. That small, sharp sound that freezes your spine. I turned. She was standing halfway behind the living room doorway, phone raised, snapping photos through the crack. "Are you insane?" I hissed. She ignored me. Her voice was soft but certain. She deserves to know the truth. I walked over, snatched the phone from her hands. Too late. The photos were already there. Greg sitting on the couch in just his boxers, laughing at the TV. My mom walking past in one of his shirts, bare under it, completely unaware. 2 people comfortable in their own home, not evidence. Violations, she said, almost proud. I sent them already. I felt something collapse inside me. Not anger, not fear, something colder. A realization that the woman beside me wasn't acting out of love or justice or loyalty. She was acting out of pride. The ugliest kind, the one that disguises itself as virtue. That night I lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of rain against the windows. She slept soundly beside me, like someone who had done something noble. And I just kept hearing her words. I did the right thing. It's strange how conviction can sound like madness when it's stripped of empathy. How the line between heroism and harm can disappear in the name of being right. I didn't know it then, but her version of justice would cost us everything. Not through betrayal or cruelty, but through the quiet, unstoppable arrogance of someone who believes their conscience is the only one that matters. The next morning, I woke to the sound of shouting. Not arguing, shouting. It took me a few seconds to recognize the voice. Greg. For as long as I'd known him, Greg had never yelled. He was the kind of man who believed silence was discipline, that losing control meant losing respect. So when I heard his voice crack through the house, raw and furious, my stomach dropped. I ran downstairs barefoot, still half asleep. He was standing in the living room, red-faced, shaking, phone clutched in his hand like it was evidence of a crime. My mom stood beside him, frozen. She looked terrified, like someone had just opened a door she thought was locked forever. "What the hell is this?" Greg shouted, waving the phone. He didn't need to explain. I knew before I even saw the screen. There they were, the photos. The same ones my wife had taken the day before. And above them a message from Melissa. "Guess you've got your little wifey to keep you company." Greg's voice shook. His hand trembled so hard I thought the phone would slip. His eyes darted between me and the stairs behind me, where my wife was standing, wide-eyed but defiant. "Is this your idea of a joke?" he barked. "You live under my roof, eat my food, sleep in my home, and this is what you do?" "I didn't—" I started, but he cut me off. "I don't give a damn who did it. Both of you out, now!" My mom reached out, her voice small. "Greg, please." "He didn't— Enough!" he snapped. "You think I don't see what this is? My own daughter sends me this filth, and it came from inside this house." He looked humiliated, not just angry. There's a kind of rage that doesn't come from hate, but from shame. That's what I saw in him. And honestly, I couldn't even blame him. My wife started to argue, voice shrill, breaking through the heavy air. "She deserves to know the truth. He's pretending to be some noble father when he's just sitting here half naked." "Stop," I said quietly, but she kept going. "She's his daughter. She deserves to see who he really is." Greg's face twisted, part disbelief, part heartbreak. For a man like him who lived by privacy and pride, it was the ultimate violation. 10 minutes later, our things were in the front yard. Bags, boxes, shoes, thrown into the wet grass like garbage. It had started to rain again, light but cold. I remember standing there watching the droplets soak into the cardboard, the colors of our clothes bleeding into the mud. The house that once felt like refuge now looked like a fortress spitting us out. My mom stood at the doorway, crying quietly. Greg didn't look at me again. He just turned away and shut the door. My wife stood in the yard, drenched, hair plastered to her face, shouting back at them through the rain. "They're hiding something. That's why they're overreacting. I'm the only one telling the truth." Her voice cracked, but not from guilt, from indignation. Even then, she believed she was the hero of the story. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. The street was silent except for the rain. It felt like the universe itself was embarrassed for us. We loaded what we could into the car, soaked clothes, half-packed boxes, a few bags of food. She slammed the passenger door and crossed her arms, muttering, "I can't believe this. After everything, they kick us out because I told the truth." I didn't answer. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. We drove in silence, the sound of the wipers thudding against the glass in steady rhythm, like a heartbeat that wouldn't calm down. We ended up at a cheap roadside motel, the kind you drive past without noticing. Flickering neon sign, faded vacancy. The carpet smelled like bleach and smoke. There were cigarette burns on the sheets, a stain on the ceiling shaped like a continent. It was the kind of place people go when they have nowhere else. She paced the room like a storm contained in a box. You know what the problem is? No one wants to face reality. Everyone's too scared of the truth. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the TV screen. I looked older, smaller, like the version of me that once believed love meant partnership had died somewhere between that house and here. She kept going, her words tumbling faster, louder. "You should be thanking me. I'm not afraid to stand up for what's right. How else you just hide behind silence?" I didn't speak. Not because I agreed, but because I finally understood there was no conversation to be had. When someone is convinced they're the only sane one in the room, every word becomes fuel for their fire. The rain outside grew heavier. It beat against the window, filling the pauses between her words. Finally I spoke, not loud, just enough for her to hear. "What the hell did you think was going to happen?" She froze. Her mouth opened and then closed again. For a second there was silence. Then she snapped, "You don't get to talk to me like that." Maybe she was right, but I wasn't trying to win an argument. I was trying to survive the realization that the woman I'd married, the person I once trusted most, had turned righteousness into a weapon. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened to the rain drip through the cracked window frame, the hum of the neon light outside, her quiet breathing beside me. She slept soundly, like someone who believed she'd done something noble. I stared at the ceiling until dawn. And I realized the scariest kind of destruction isn't the one that comes from hate. It's the kind that comes from someone who believes they're saving you. By morning, the air between us felt heavier than the rain. We didn't argue. We didn't touch. We just existed. Two people sitting in the same room, living in completely different realities. That was the first morning I stopped seeing her as my wife. She wasn't my partner anymore. She was just the person standing in the wreckage she'd built, still convinced it was a monument to her virtue. I didn't yell after that night, didn't argue, didn't try to make her understand. Something in me had shut off. A switch flipped quietly somewhere deep like the fuse of a house gone dark. It wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. The kind that sits in your chest and makes every breath feel like work. When I woke up the next morning, the motel air was thick and stale. The neon light outside buzzed through the curtain, throwing red shadows on the wall. She was still asleep, curled up with her phone next to her, the same phone that had detonated our life. I watched her for a moment. She looked peaceful. That was the strangest part, how peace could exist beside the ruins she'd created. She still thought she was right. She always did. When she woke up, she stretched, looked at me and said calmly, "I did what needed to be done. Someone had to stand up to them." I didn't answer, because what do you say to someone who mistakes destruction for courage? She sat at the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I caught a glimpse of the screen, articles about toxic families, emotional boundaries, and the psychology of gaslighting. It was almost poetic. She was building a fortress out of therapy words she didn't understand. I realized something then. You can't win an argument with someone who treats their delusion as morality. If I said I was hurt, I'd be accused of protecting abusers. If I stayed calm, she'd say I was gaslighting her. If I defended myself, she'd call it deflection. There was no way out and except silence. So I went quiet. Completely. At first, she seemed relieved. She thought my silence meant surrender. She even smiled sometimes, mistaking my calm for forgiveness. But silence has weight. And eventually she started to feel it. She began asking questions she didn't really want answered. "Why aren't you saying anything? Do you still love me? Are you mad at me?" I'd shrug. "Just tired." The truth was I wasn't tired of her. I was tired of the version of me I became around her. Constantly walking on moral eggshells, apologizing for not being angry enough, not loud enough, not righteous enough. It's strange how stillness can be louder than any fight. In that small, musty motel room, my silence grew like fog. Thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. Days blurred together. I spent the mornings out looking for work. Gas stations, construction sites, anywhere that paid cash. She stayed inside, always scrolling, always posting. Her phone was her altar, her audience. She told herself stories online that made her the victim, the brave truth-teller. Every night when I came back, she'd try to start another argument, to pull me into her orbit. When I didn't bite, she got anxious. She needed chaos. It was the only language she spoke fluently, but calm. Calm was a language I was learning fast. One night I sat on the floor beside the bed, laptop open, typing quietly. She glanced over. "What are you doing?" "Just checking old emails," I said. "I found one from our old landlord, the man who rented us our first apartment when we first got married. We'd been happy there once. Before pride replaced partnership. Before she decided that being right mattered more than being kind. I typed a short message. If it's just me this time, would you consider renting again? 10 minutes later, he replied, if you pay on time and don't cause trouble, sure. I stared at those words for a long time. It wasn't joy I felt, it was relief. Relief that there was still a version of life waiting for me beyond her noise. The next morning I started planning quietly, moved what little money I had into a separate account, printed out my resume at a public library, called an old co-worker, who mentioned a possible opening at his shop. Every small step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself she'd talked me out of. It wasn't revenge. It was oxygen. That night, she asked me again, "You're so quiet lately. You're not mad anymore?" I said no. She smiled, relieved, not realizing that no didn't mean peace. It meant indifference. That was the moment I knew I was already gone. Not physically yet, but emotionally, completely. My heart had packed up long before my body would. For the next 2 days, I existed in silence. I ate, slept, worked, mechanical, detached. She tried to bait me, then begged, then cried. None of it reached me. When someone drains every drop of empathy from you, what's left isn't hatred, it's emptiness. The night before I left, I sat at the motel's little desk. The air smelled like mildew and bleach. She was in the bathroom humming to herself, completely unaware. I looked at the mirror across the room, my reflection dim and tired, and whispered to myself, "This isn't survival anymore. It's surrender." And I'd done enough surrendering. I took out a small notepad and wrote a single note. "You said you acted out of morality. I'm acting out of reality." I folded it neatly, placed it on the desk, and set the key next to it. Before dawn, I zipped up my bag, clothes, my laptop, my father's old watch, and stepped outside. The air was cold. The sky was just starting to lighten. I didn't look back at the door. Didn't check if she woke up. Didn't wait for her to notice. I just walked. Down the long, empty stretch of road, suitcase rolling behind me, shoes splashing through puddles left by the night's rain. And for the first time in months, I felt free. Not happy. Not victorious, just free. Because sometimes walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only sane thing left to do. I left that morning before the sun was up. The sky was a soft, cold grey, the kind that sits low and presses down on everything. The streets were empty. Just the hum of the vending machine outside, the buzz of the motel sign behind me flickering between vacancy and antsy. My bag was heavier than it should have been. Not because of what was in it, but because of what I was leaving behind. There's a moment right after you walk away from someone toxic, when the silence feels foreign, too big, too loud, too empty. You think you'll miss them, but then you realize what you actually miss is the noise that distracted you from yourself. The bus ride back to town was quiet. Rain streaked the window, the world outside blurring into shapes and color. Every time we stopped at a light, I saw reflections of people, tired, indifferent, just existing. It made sense. For the first time in months, I felt like one of them again. Just a regular man with problems, not the character in someone else's self-righteous tragedy. The old apartment was still there, dusty, half-empty, and cold. The landlord handed me the keys like he didn't even remember who I was. Perfect, no explanations, no questions, no judgment. Just a transaction. When I walked inside, the air was stale. Dust motes floated in the weak afternoon light. The floor creaked under my shoes. And yet it felt more like home than any place I'd lived in years. The silence here wasn't heavy. It was clean. For weeks I slept on an air mattress, ate microwave noodles, worked part-time at a hardware store. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I woke up to my own alarm. I went to bed without waiting for a fight. Every day something inside me stitched itself back together. Quietly, patiently. The third night, she texted. A long message, half confession, half accusation. I only did what was right. You abandoned me when I needed you most. You're just like them. I read it twice, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel nothing. And I did. Then I typed 3 words. You made it happen. No anger. No punctuation. Just truth. I hit send, muted the conversation, and turned off my phone. It buzzed for another hour. I didn't check. That was the night I slept through till morning. A week later, my mum called. Her voice was softer than I remembered. I know you didn't do anything wrong, she said quietly. But I also understand why Greg lost it. He felt humiliated. I know, I said. I don't blame him. There was a long pause in the line. One of those pauses that say everything words can't. Then she added, Greg said you can come get whatever's left. Just don't bring her. I smiled to myself. I wasn't planning to. When I arrived, Greg was standing by the porch. The air was cold, sharp, autumn creeping in. We didn't shake hands. We didn't need to. He looked older, tired, but his eyes weren't angry anymore. Just human, I said. Thank you for letting us stay, even for a while. He nodded slowly. You're not the problem, kid. Just learn who deserves your loyalty. That hit harder than I expected, because he was right. Kindness isn't weakness. It's just something that needs better aim. I loaded my bags into the car. Before driving off, I looked back at the house, the same porch where I once thought family could fix everything. Now it just looked like what it had always been, a place where good people made human mistakes. I didn't feel anger or sadness, just clarity. 3 months passed. I found a steady job at a small woodworking shop. The hours were long, but the rhythm made sense. Work, sleep, eat, repeat. Somewhere in that monotony, peace found me again. I moved into a new apartment, small, clean and quiet. There was a window that overlooked a row of maple trees that turned red when fall came. Every morning the light hit the wall in soft gold. I'd drink coffee in silence, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, contentment without condition. Then, one evening, a letter came in the mail. The divorce papers. No note, no explanation. Just a signature at the bottom. It felt anticlimactic. Like a storm ending, not with thunder, but with still air. That night she texted one last time. I hope you understand someday. I didn't reply. Because I already did. Some people burn everything around them just to prove they're right, and then sit alone in the ashes wondering why it's cold. Understanding her didn't mean forgiving her. It meant realizing peace doesn't come from proving your point. It comes from knowing when to stop arguing with people who love their chaos more than they love you. A few months later, I went back to visit my mum. The house was quieter than before, but warmer somehow. Greg nodded when he saw me, not with guilt or awkwardness, but with something close to respect. We didn't talk about the past. We just sat outside drinking coffee, listening to the wind move through the trees. He said, "You're doing all right?" "Yeah," I said. "Better than I was." He smiled. "Good, don't lose that." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. I didn't get revenge. I didn't expose her lies or post my side of the story online. I just rebuilt. And somehow that felt louder than any victory could have been. Sometimes peace isn't found in shouting back. It's found in finally being quiet for yourself. Now, when I think back to that night in the motel, the red neon flickering, the rain against the window, her voice sharp with indignation, I can still hear myself saying it. What the hell did you think was going to happen? Back then, I thought it was anger. Now I know it was clarity. She thought she was exposing the truth. But all she exposed was herself and me. I found something better than justice. I found peace.